So, good afternoon, good evening in India. Welcome to the Defense Dialogues. My name is Sanjay Puri. I'm the chairman of the US India Political Action Committee, and I really have a distinguished privilege of having some incredible experts on both sides of the US India Defense Dialogue. And this gets a sense of urgency because of the time that we are on. We are really lucky to have experts on both sides. We have Sunil Mehta with us, who is the Executive Vice President of Coronet and has been, Coronet
Right
is
on the
a leading defense company based in Washington, D.C. And he's been in business for a long period of time. So thank you, Sunil, for being with us. We also have with us on the other side Maruf Raza. Maruf is a prominent defense expert and analyst who is on TV and obviously listened to by a lot of the leaders across the board. We have General Sivaj, who is a defense expert with us. And also we have Hemant Kumar Rai, who is CEO of DSEPL and also a defense expert. And we will be joined by Swami Iyer, who is a defense expert in the US with 23 years of experience. Um, I would like to start off keeping in mind in 2 weeks, the United States is going to have a very consequential elections. And I don't believe in polls after the last election, but let's just say if you were believing in polls, the polls currently say that Vice President Biden will probably be the next president, and President Trump will have one term. So, given that consequence, I am interested to understand from our esteemed guests because during President Trump's term, we have seen the dramatic growth of the U.S.-India defense trade relationship policies. The trade now is about $18 billion. You've seen some incredible policies. In July, they opened up the exports of UAVs to India. You see joint exercises. You see the Quad. Today, we've just heard the C-170s in India. And there's a lot of cooperation, collaboration going on. Uh, Sunil, from your perspective, if there is a change in administration, um, I understand, as a business person, really, to you, it doesn't matter who is in government. But do you see, just briefly, any changes in what the relationship will be?
Uh, I think that India-US relationship has matured to a point that I think and it has gained such a momentum that I don't see from the perspective of industry and specifically the medium-sized industry, there will be any immediate impact. Uh, the perspective I bring is a company that is medium-sized but very important supplier of defense communications equipment to U.S. military, as well as which has company that has a good success working with Indian defense establishment also. So in the short term, I think we don't see much change. I would say just may add slightly out of context, but since the Modi government came into power, we have seen over the years the procurement and the projects on the Indian side are run more like a business way, in a business-like manner, with some level of expediency. So I've seen great improvement, and I think going forward that should continue.
So that's good to hear that you see a sense of consistency, and with the continuing of the policies that have happened. I would like to hear from the other side from Maruf. Maruf, what is the thought process in India? Because as you know, President Trump and Prime Minister Modi have built a pretty strong personal connect, personal relationship. You've seen that in Houston, you saw that in Ahmedabad. and other places, the bomb army that existed. If there is a change in administration, uh, what does the Indian defense industry and sector think? If, is there going to be an impact?
You see, I agree with what Mr. Mehta has said. Uh, can you hear me? Is my mic on?
Yeah, Maruk, we can hear you.
So I agree with what Mr. Mehta has said, and let me give you a couple of bullet points. You see, the first thing to understand is whatever presidential order comes into being in the United States, whether it's Trump again or Biden this time, the relationship with India is now at a level with the US that it's going to be something very, very unusual that's going to turn the tide against India. In terms of how the US, the industry, the Washington, Foggy Bottom, and whatever else views New Delhi and its engagement with India for a variety of reasons. One is that India provides the US that one pivot in Asia, which it has been looking for a long time. I'm talking in geostrategic terms. The second thing is that India provides the US a market, not just to sell products, but even to look at producing products from India for other countries' markets by hopping over via India through transfer of technology and various arrangements. The third is that, with the exception of the Middle East countries that have deep pockets, India has deep pockets, but India also provides the US the kind of strategic leverage that the US is been actually engaging India for from the days of 1949. It was, I mean, I'm doing a book on China and India-China relations and the boundary issues. But you go back to Nehru's times and how he rebuffed the various advances made by the US. And it was only in the time of President Clinton during the Kargil conflict that the US then realized that India can be a much more dependable partner to engage with in geostrategic and in business terms, as against Pakistan, which remained and still remains a black hole. Now, the other aspect was that every US president, from Mr. Clinton, Bush, and Obama, and Trump, have remained consistent on a few foreign policy pillars. One of them is how US must continue the engagement with India. This used to be an obsession, from my understanding, in Washington, only with having a consistency on two other issues, actually three. One was Middle East, one was China, and of course Russia was always there in the shadows. But India has come in as another consistent pillar where they have to engage. Now, where is the difference between what Mr. Trump has put on in place and what happened before? Please remember that Obama's visit to India had led to Chai Pe Charcha. Obama's visit to India also led to an announcement that India would become the major defense partner for the US. And I remember it was on record to say that India would get access to 99% of American technologies, and the 1% it would not get access to, nobody in the world gets access to. So I think that's fair enough. And so therefore, India was put into the same bracket in many ways like US allies. India has a problem with the term ally. So India wanted to be treated as a strategic partner, and the strategic partnership is with the US is very different from India's strategic partnership, and there are almost 30 of them with various other countries. And the other two important aspects to understand is that India's ability to provide, and there's a reluctance in the Foreign Office in India to do that, but India's ability to provide the US as a partner in many of the conflicts in Asia, which the US would like to extricate, whether it is Afghanistan or it's West Asia, is an issue that Delhi has been reluctant to. Now, I'm not in favor of India putting boots on ground in Afghanistan, but I'm certainly in favor of India becoming part of a US strategic partnership to provide positioning of some security forces, particularly for energy security resources in West Asia. Now, the technology aspect is something that we cannot ignore. Now, India wants to move in Atmanirbhar Bharat or Make in India to a level which India should have gone to years ago. Look at the case of Israel. Look at where we are. We became independent about the same time, and look, what a pathetic state our defense industries are, and it is basically because of a protectionist mindset where the defense public sector undertakings and the ordnance factories have really not grown from babyhood to teenage and beyond that. Now, here is your chance. Here is your chance to get into arrangements, whether through industry, whether through FMS sales, which could have built up arrangements to also transfer technology, and finally, to get Indian partners in industry to provide the hardware and even software. I mean, much of defense equipment is very IT centric, and therefore IT is an area where India has strengths in. Why can't the US engage Indian IT industry to become part of the defense industrial complex in India in a bigger way? So, broadly speaking, these are the issues. And of course, I mean, you want me to talk about India China standoff? Certainly, it's a different chapter altogether. But clearly, I think it is very reassuring in New Delhi the kind of statements that have been made by US, Mr. Pompeo's statements, the fact that there are three aircraft carrier groups and a helicopter carrier group operating in the Asian waters, and therefore, if China wishes to scale it up, we can handle a border-to-border conflict. But if China wants to scale it up, then Mr. Xi Jinping could be looking to do something that Hitler did and never lived long enough to repent it.
Thanks, Maruf. Um, Given that you brought up the U.S. The India-China issues going on right now, I want to reach out to Hemant and also Janu Siwat to really understand, Hemant, from you, um, that, and then Janu Siwat, how does that play into the current standoff that Maruf alluded to with the U.S. relationship, especially in the defense side? So, Hemant, if you could just briefly talk about that, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, I will limit it to basically Indian industry and the US industries together. You
Hmm.
know what Maruf told and then Sunil told, I agree with them. I mean, the US and India relation is at the best. It's mature enough and it's time to take off. Now you see, defense acquisition procedure, now it's become DAP from DPP earlier. It has aligned with the Make in India drive, right? And which has further has taken a leap, from Make in India, India want to become a hub for making foreign too, isn't it? Now here, the time for the US industry not to become a supplier to the Indian industry, but they should come and join here and do the manufacturing with the MSMEs. And India can become a center, basically, for a manufacturing hub for Middle East, Southeast Asia, and South Asia. And accordingly, we see that's Atmanirbhar Bharat. There is an emphasis. This is the right time for the US industry now to start venturing and have a quantifiable, in-depth discussion with the MSMEs in India, and therefore able to align. Now the problem is, see, all the discussion in the past, basically it has consumed a lot of time. Now, in this present crisis, you have to have time-bound action and activities, right? There are a lot of regulations which have passed through in the US as well as in India. Now, how to curtail this, how to have a solid timeline, how to have a US strategic policies basically in alignment with the DAP 2020, we just released on October 1st October 2020, right? So this needs to be aligned to the Indian industries, to the MSME especially, and US should take as a perspective by making India as a hub for Middle East, Southeast Asia, and South Asia market, and not only for the India. It will become a big leap if it is taken a time-bound manner activities.
Thanks, Hemant. Jal Siwaj, I wanted to come back to the China issue, and I'll have Sunil address Hemant's point about this Atmanirbhar project. But Jal Siwaj, there is a serious standoff that probably the world does not maybe pay as much attention to between India and China, which is considered one of the top three flashpoints right now in the world. What role does U.S. defense uh, play there or can play there? What is your view? If you can just address that brief part for us, please.
Sanjay, first of all, I was chief of staff of that area for 2 years, so I'm aware of the ground reality. No doubt about it. The standoff which has taken place between India and China, especially starting from month of April, is a unique by itself. Point is, the China thought this is a window of opportunity available to it when the whole world is basically embroiled in COVID 19. They wanted to make use of this window of opportunity and try to come and take the area which possibly up till 1959 of their claim line. They were slightly worried that some sort of statement which have been passed from the Indian side that the excision is also part of India and it should finally come to India has also rattled them. And also to some extent the Gilgit Pakistan is also part of India and is a part of now POK must come where the China-Pakistan economic corridor is going and it is a flagship project for China. So China got slightly worried and rattled and they thought this is a window of opportunity to come and occupy certain heights and also do incursion and give the depth to the Excision area and also give a depth to their western highway called G219 going from Lhasa to Xinjiang. So therefore, what they did is they came, they occupied some area, and that is where the Indians have also done a mirror deployment. Now Indians are in a position that we can look into the eyes of China and we can face them. However, on 9th of 29th, 30th August, we have turned the table completely. What we did, the Indian forces have occupied the strategic height from south of Pangangso called Kailash Range, and due to which you are now dominating the complete area of Chishul Moldo and also the Sprangrur Gap from where Chinese came in 1962. So as on today, we are in a position to defend our every inch of ground. Our now requirement as far as China is concerned, we will negotiate with you provided you go back to pre-April 2020 position. We are not going to vacate what we have able to manage to capture in 29th, 30th August. Now, this is a point where we are there. Today, we are militarily strong enough to challenge them, whether it is Indian Army, which is a battle hardened, whereas the Chinese have only fought a war in 1979 with Vietnam, and that also they were badly defeated. And second thing is that our Air Force has an edge because most of the weapon system with the Air Force, the combat power which we have, whether it is Rafale now, Sukhoi 30 MK, MiG-29, Mirage 2000, Jagur, Apache attack captor. And the third thing is the Navy, which is there in Indian Ocean region and can choke the Malacca state if there is a requirement. So therefore, we are in a position to handle the Chinese by itself. And not only that, we can take it to front, not only with China, also its proxy Pakistan if they try to do something in Western sector. So we are very well prepared. However, we will need a help in terms of intelligence, in terms of surveillance, in terms of some spare part equipment which can be forthcoming from US. You need US as a strategic partner because in Indo-Pacific, the name has been changed Indo-Pacific from Asia-Pacific to give the importance to India. And there the Quad is working. That is Australia, India, Japan and America. There we are a strategic partner to each other. The expansionism attitude of the China, not only in Ladakh, imagine what they done in South China Sea, what they did in East China Sea when they have taken the Senkaku Island of Japan, they trying to this thing, what they did in Taiwan, what they did in Hong Kong in new security law, then what they did in Xinjiang province and also in Tibet. So they have a problem all over. So there is a country as far as China is concerned that China has problem with majority of countries, not only which are having a land boundary, but also the sea boundary. So the expansionism attitude of the Chinas has to be now challenged and threatened. And this you can do only that if you are get together, especially the Quad. And what has happened in last 20 years, the relationship between India and US, irrespective whether it is a Democratic or a Republican president, starting from Bill Clinton, had matured, starting from nuclear supply deal which was called 123 agreement, and then COMCASA, then your logistic and management agreement, strategic trade one. You have taken number of weapon system from America, state of art, which they have given it. In fact, today the America is the fourth largest supplier of arms to India, which after you can say Russia, France, Israel, and then come America. A time will come that it may become number two or number one. What they have given in last 6 to 7 years is creditable. That is what is important. The state of art, because they were not reluctant to give a technology to India, but they have given in terms of weapon system M777. That is a ultra light howitzer they have given us. They have given us lot of air force, helicopters and aircraft. C-17, Globemaster, 22 of them. Then Apache attack helicopter. They have given us. They have also given us Chinook helicopter. They have given us C-13J Hercules. They have also given us the state of art drones. They have given us the surveillance and also the Raki aircraft called P-81. They have given us the submarine killer MS-2460. So therefore, today we have a strategic partner with US, and the relations are going maturing day by day. India needs America, America needs India. In Indo-Pacific, that is the crunch point. And therefore, we are the largest democracy and the US is the oldest democracy. It is automatically that we have to be gathered. In time to come, our relation will get further matured. And if we want a freedom of navigation and in Indo-Pacific and a rule of law, then it is very natural that India, along with US, Australia and Japan, get together as a Quad, which is now going to become a ground reality in time to come.
Thanks, General. I know, Sunil, you have to leave. Did you want to just do a quick, Hemant brought up this whole Atmanirbhar and other things. You've done business in India as a very successful company leading that effort. Before you leave, and then we have Swami, that I want to pick some of the points there. So, Sunil, before you leave, I know you have an urgent thing going on. Sunil, you're on mute.
Sanjay, thank you very much. So I would take from what General just said that this current geopolitical situation has really put a lot of focus and urgency on not only the relationships but also on the part of India to modernize the military, to bring in the equipment. So that's one fact which as an industry executive, I look at it and I look at it as an opportunity. Now, coming back to what Mr. Raza said and what Mr. Hemant Kumar said, that there needs to be an alignment of procurement policies on both sides, both governments, that we cannot rely on. That will maybe never happen. Each are the countries of their own in their own right, and they are not going to align to what we industry want, or it'll take a long time. So as a mid-sized company, what we have done is we have found and we have succeeded to do business in India, working with the Indian establishment. Okay, the Atmanirbhar initiative, let's say, just came recently within a few months, and prior to that, for 3-4 years, we had something called Make in India 2, etc., variations. But even before that, like Sanjay said, we have been involved in Indian military equipment market for almost 18, 19 years now. And the way we found success is to actually have a very strong local presence. So you cannot work on a Atmanirbhar project sitting in a company from America or a company from England or wherever. So first of all, you need a establishment in India. And then what we found very interesting is to work right from the prototype stage. We cannot come later as a big brother from America and say, hey, here is a technology, please take it over. It doesn't work like that. There are a lot of resistance, there are a lot of hurdles in the DPP. So what we found very interesting is to work at a prototype level and work with the DRDOs. So we had a route that we took, and we are not an IT company. So, like Sanjay and Mr. Raza also said earlier, that we are actually a defense electronics communication hardware company, and we add a lot of value to the market where the Indian organization design develops something indigenously, and from our US organization, whatever is not restricted, whatever is allowed, we supplement them. So I think what I would say is you need on the ground presence, you need a lot of patience, and the doors open. And I think in last 15 years, we may have sold, being a small company, we have sold no service, actually hardware worth almost $30 million. So I think I look at the current situation as a great time for small and medium-sized companies on both sides to come together, and I won't say use the word the exploit, but I would say more rather than leverage and thrive, and that will help both the countries.
Wonderful. Sunil, thanks so much for being with us. I know you had an earlier commitment, but thanks so much. Hopefully, we'll be having more of these so you can join us with that. So thank you so much, Sunil.
Thank you,
I'm
everybody. Yes, I really enjoyed being on the panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to turn to Swami, who has joined us. Swami is got 23 years of tremendous defense experience on around the world across the different areas. Swami, one of the questions which I asked when we were having some technical difficulties was, and I'll address it to you because you're sitting also like me in Washington, is there are, if you believe polls, and I don't believe polls, as you know, Swami, last time around, we got the polls completely wrong. But if there is a change in administration, one question would be to you would be, is will there be a change in the relationship between US and India on the defense side? And second is, you heard the general talk about the China situation. Maruf has discussed it extensively, and I'll bring Maruf back on. Is what role can the US play in this India-China standoff? So two quick questions for you, Swami.
Oh, thanks you, Sanjay. We appreciate that. I hope you can hear me okay
Yes.
on the stream.
Yes.
Largely, I don't think the policies or the stance toward India as a strategic partner will change from one administration to the next. And evidence of that is between the Clinton administration, the Bush administration, the Obama administration. We really see nothing but a prioritization of that relationship. In fact, you tend to see from relationship and administration to administration over the years, in the last 15 years, a bit of an escalation in the partnership between the two. So I don't believe we will see any significant degradation in the relationship. It will either be status quo or there'll be some enhancement to it. Simply because regionally, the Asia Pacific is recognized in both parties as a critical area for the United States to, in order to bring its influence to the world. So you will not see language of India being a proxy toward China. I think the United States apparatus and foreign policy circuit has certainly figured out that that's not a term that anybody likes to hear in any side of the situation. But you will see a significant increase in what kind of partnerships are relevant between the two countries in defense. Now, defense has been a very large cornerstone of the economic exchange between the two countries. I was part of the C-17, C-130 deals as foreign military sales. They operate ecosystems on both sides. And so I think while all the foreign policy and gesturing that may occur is great, the real engine behind the alliance between the two countries is in the economic development of the two ecosystems in aerospace and defense, when it relates to those foreign military sales. And I think foreign military sales has proven to be the most successful engine for getting those products in, whether it be C-17s or weapons or C-130s and things like that. We see it through the previous offset programs, the development of an Indian ecosystem which bedded down um, tier one and tier two suppliers in the Indian apparatus and inside the Indian industry to support the development and production of those systems. You see a great deal of jobs growth in the United States when you're selling billions of dollars worth of defense equipment. That tends to be the bigger tie. Those two ties tend to work at a grassroots level amongst industry, like we just heard. It also works at a grassroots level between the militaries. When you're operating with M777s together, the same equipment on C-17s and C-130s together, the interactions in training and tactics development and procedures actually creates a 10, 20, or 30-year relationship, even all the way down to the maintenance of the aircraft, that tends to cement a stronger foundation between the two countries. This is why it kind of transcends across different administrations. Now, politically, as different things happen on a geopolitical scale, each side will take the position relevant to its own interests, as any country would. But in terms of our defense engagement, I think it's quite clear that the United States and India have grown closer together, and they'll continue to grow closer together. But I think the pace of it will be based upon the economic development of the two aerospace and defense ecosystems concurrently, where each side is looking at the technology it needs to advance its own interests, the jobs it wants to create in its own interest. And you're seeing an effort in the United States today to improve foreign military sales of our technology development to make them, as we say, protect the crown jewels in the United States, but allow for faster sales and more open sales to our partners around the country and around the world. And I think you'll see that kind of enhance the Indian capability to join with us on defense. But I don't think you're going to see revolutionary change. I mean, the pace of growth in the relations with the United States and India has always been one of slow, methodical, patient movements, and I think you'll see the same thing. And I think again, the driver is the financial industry aspects of the two that tends to influence some of the political structures to increase the ability for the two countries to work together. On the military scale, I think we've seen only good examples. I've yet to see a negative example really in the last 20 years of where the militaries haven't found a way or tried to find a way to get together, particularly in humanitarian aid and disaster relief. So I don't see much of a change. We'll probably see a different set of language, but it'll still be the same steady pace that you see over the last 20 years.
Any comment on the India-China standoff and a role that the U.S. is playing or can play?
Yeah, the India-China stand-up is one where I mean it's been a regular long-term issue between the two countries, right? And the United States has, and most of the world have played their positions very carefully between them. I don't know that you'll see an overt response from the United States in any one position or another, depending on how provocative, let's say, China becomes. You'll always see messages of support. You'll always see the ability to provide systems and equipment to India when asked for it. But I don't know if we would take an interventionist or the United States take an interventionist move there. It really does depend upon the relationship of the U.S. and China in general and whether or not that wants to be another lever that's used in the overall greater U.S.-China relationship. But I don't think the India-China stand-up takes a priority position inside the U.S.-China foreign policy. I think it's an ancillary lever or an ancillary event that can or may not be used depending upon how India actually responds to that need. I mean, I don't know how much India wants particularly that kind of intervention or not. I mean, it can be an unpredictable element in the way that India handles China. So, from my perspective, I think the U.S. will probably follow India's lead on what is expected, but never go further than anything that might negatively affect its stance with China, whether it be on trade tariffs or geopolitical problems in South China Sea. I think the U.S. will play its own game there. So if it's useful, it'll happen. If it's not, it'll be neutral at that point.
Oh, that's very, very helpful, Swami. I would like to bring in Vic Chawans, also another defense executive here based in Houston. Vic, you've seen the evolution of the U.S.-India defense relationship. You've heard experts like Maruf, General Sivaj, and Hemant talk about it. What are the perspectives that you think will lead to further growth? This administration has made a lot of progress in terms of loosening up exports of key things like UAVs and others. Um, any thoughts that you have towards this, Vic?
So I agree with what Swami was saying regarding there won't be much of a change between the administrations because this train has already left the station. It started a while back, and what I want to add is also what President Obama had done along with Ash Carter when he was the defense secretary. I was closely involved with him for the defense technology trade initiatives. So this is where you have to put your mouth where the money is. But put your money where the mouth is, kind of thing, where India does need to co-develop, and you need to be there in the technology development stage. So you don't have to worry about the technology transfer later on. And I have been personally involved in the Joint Striker Fighter, where we wanted India to be the co-partner. I am currently working on the next generation rotorcraft with US and NATO allies, where this is one place where India can come in designing the next generation rotorcraft. So this is where India needs to come in the R&D stage if they want a technology piece. And this is where the industries in both India and US can benefit out of. And companies in the mid-tier, mainly, not only the larger companies are also interested in the US to transfer operations in India. So there is a two-way street, if you want to call it.
Thanks, Vic. Maruf, there was the sense for a long period of time in India that the US is not a trusted long-term partner, and then there was the whole Cold War impact. You obviously have covered it from a long period of time. Have those feelings changed in the bureaucracy, in the Indian leadership across the board, or will it still take some time as far as US is concerned?
See, in India, relationship with the US still draws mixed responses. Now, I'll tell you why. It's emerging from some of the statements the experts have made just now. While the US and the US industry, which also in some ways influences US foreign policy, is driven by a very transactional approach, which means that, if you buy our weapon systems, then we'll give you the best, but then you're clearly in our camp and you can't go to any other camp. And this was most visible when the Indians went in for the S-400 deal with the Russians. There was a lot of alarming statements that came out from various observers. The second thing is that America's track record for standing in for its friends is still not 100% something that we could go by. For example, when years ago the Chinese and the Japanese had a standoff over Senkaku Diaoyu Islands, I mean, statements to the extent of the US saying that if China opens fire first on Japan, then the US would come in. But if Japan escalates tensions and it leads to a conflict, then US will have to measure its responses. Now, that is not to say that a partnership with the US gives you a license to go to war every now and then, but a partnership with the US has to be a kind of bond in blood. Now, would the Quad, for example, follow NATO guidelines, wherein NATO countries have an arrangement that an attack on one NATO country is seen as an attack on all? Now, if that emerges, and it's quite rapidly that the Quad ministers have met, even in a time like this, you've had earlier meetings between secretaries, you've had meetings at joint secretary level, so things are moving fast. But what China could do vis-a-vis India does require more clear reassurance from the US, as much it needs India to also define the red lines as to what would be the point beyond which India would respond. Now, let me tell you two or three things. Before I come to China, I want to mention about the foreign military sales. India is conscious about the advantage of foreign military sales. It does away with a lot of time wastage. I mean, if you go by the processes that are in place, you should be prepared for 5 to 15 years for any transaction to take place. In the case of FMS deals, it happens much faster. And the good thing about FMS deals now is a new policy announcement that effective 1st October, there will be no offset liability on companies that go, or the countries that do the foreign military sales, which means that you don't have to plow back 30 to 50% into the Indian market of the total deal value in a list of 22, 24 items, which range from military equipment to homeland security to telecom and whatever else. So therefore, the companies can actually look to make profits and get back their R&D money, which they have invested in the equipment. And India gets first-class equipment, like the Rafale deal, like the C-17s, the 864 Apache, the other state-of-art equipment that was agreed in Mr. Trump's visit, which included the Guardian drones and whatever else. So that's a good thing. I also agree with all the points General Saab has made, because I think it's important to understand that the intrusions by China, and I'm not saying incursions, I'm saying intrusions by China, has put into motion three or four things. One is suddenly the urgency to address the modernization demands of the armed forces. Because for too long, I've had service chiefs tell me that only purchases were made when they came to a critical juncture. I mean, you can't uh, have a first class military force with second or third class equipment. And that has been the lament of generations of military officers. The second thing is that those 20 brave men who died in the very rough hand battles, they didn't die in vain. And the best way, I've said it on TV a number of times, to honor their memory is to actually address what should have been addressed vis-a-vis China donkeys years ago. For example, the upgradation of infrastructure on the border, the shifting of forces to have a more realistic force deployment vis-a-vis Pakistan and China, and keep some reserves up your sleeves. And I think we're reaching that point now. I recently did a very detailed piece for a magazine as a cover story, in which I argue that in the event of a boundary battle, not escalating to other levels, where the maritime level could see China's Malacca Strait dilemma coming true, because maritime wise, navy wise, our navy is pretty much in our neighborhood in a position to block Chinese vessels and cause them economic and military embarrassment. But it is at the higher level of space where we need the US assistance. And it can be very easily given to us without making a song and dance about it, as I would understand it was given during the Balakot airstrikes on Pakistan. As I understand, it is being provided even right now in terms of satellite surveillance, because about uh, more than 50% of the satellites, and military satellites per se, are largely US and Chinese satellites in the sky. And therefore getting intelligence information where we are weak in gathering that in the far distance. The near intelligence, UAV, aircrafts, helicopters, all that can give you, but the far distance intelligence would have been good if the Indian regime had woken up earlier to what has been China's evolving intent over the last 70 years. There was a lack of assessment. It is not, don't just call it an intelligence failure, it is a failure of assessment, to not read your enemy's intent. And I call China enemy. I've always addressed that as enemy from the days Mr. George Fernandez became the first politician to do that, that to assess China's intent adequately. And so therefore we need US intelligence there, and round the clock US military intelligence to help us. And that will position us in such a way that China would need to make a face saving gain. I mean, China has got a lot of internal problems. Their soldiers are from one child families, which means that if they die, there's nobody to look after their family. So they're scared to die. And General Saab will bear me out, our chaps are looking to die. That's the difference.
Well,
The second thing is there is a lot of resentment in China about how the veterans are trained and treated. And the veterans filter that sentiment to the man on the ground. He said, one day I'll also be a sentiment. What am I going to die for a system that doesn't care for you? And China's J-20 Chengdu, he is not really a fifth generation fighter as it's being trumpeted, because the Sukhoi has sighted it on air. And if the Sukhoi does, that means it's not invisible. That means it's not fifth generation. And even the Pakistanis don't buy the J-20 with all the paraphernalia. They want to buy the equipment from others. And China itself is ordering more Russian aircrafts. And then you have the naval issues. The Chinese Navy might be overall looking at numbers, but I don't think the Chinese Navy can produce the kind of effect that the American Navy can with all the resources that it can bring to play. But will it bring to play or not? I think the issue that is going to really tilt the tide is the frustration that Mr. Xi Jinping and his team is having after Mr. Trump's announcement of restricting the sale of microchips and other software related items to China, because that is going to put the brakes on his ambition of a $500 billion deal, of which the 5G and the Huawei and all those were part of that. And the restrictions placed might get China to go for the grab of TSMC in Taiwan. If it does that, then the US is going to respond. I think, everyone talks of South China Sea. Quite frankly, for me, in my hierarchy of things, South China Sea is number 4 or 5. The big issue is how China will respond to Taiwan. The big issue is how it's going to respond to the boundary with India. Because if India manages to complete the standoff, which we physically are in a position to handle it, not now, for the next couple of years, we're not worried about the winter. Our chaps are hardened, seasoned, acclimatized. They're fully now equipped to take on. The point is, are the Chinese going to stick it out for that long? Because the air in that part of China's boundary is more rarefied than the air at our part. They can't breathe that well. Are they going to fight with oxygen cylinders? So the reality, people are not talking about. Everyone just goes to the internet, picks up the numbers, how many aircrafts, how many tanks, how many everything. And, does India have that to match it? There is a US Naval War College report which does a more realistic study of what's on the boundary. And you will get a much better picture of what we can bring to bear, play against them or not. But the issue is that where is it going to lead us? For China, the issue is, if India stands up to them, then their agenda on multiple things, Xi Jinping's statement, his vision for 2025, his vision for 2050, his vision for even 2020 is all going to fall flat. And I believe there are a lot of rumbles within China about the Chinese administration and Xi Jinping not meeting their dreams and expectations. So there's political turmoil there. There is a military standoff on the border. There is limitation to your high-tech agenda, which even Aksai Chin was meant to fulfill through the waters and various other things that they wanted to capture in the Indus Valley systems, which they wanted thereafter to help manufacture silicon wafer. As some of us know, that every 10,000 liters of fresh water gives you, through mixing with other ingredients, a fresh sand of the Taklamakan desert, north of Kashmir in the Xinjiang area, will give you a 30 centimeter square of silicon wafers, which in turn allows you to make microchips. So that's the land grab agenda. What's their agenda with Taiwan is silicon wafers and microchip industry from TSMC. What is their agenda in South China Sea is that they've already made an investment and they want to protect that investment, and China will not accept any of your long statements or any of your arbitration at the Hague. What China recognizes is the ability of your ships to block the activities of their ships. You do that, and then the ball game changes completely. Or are you going to just make speeches and statements? So there is a certain degree, going back to your original question, of interest in where does this lead to, and will the US call its bluff really, or just go around making speeches everywhere else, because it doesn't affect US's health, but it affects the health of many of his friends in South China Sea. It does certainly create uneasiness there in Taiwan. In India, we've learned to live with it. We're living with coronavirus, we're living with China, and that's also a bloody Chinese virus. I wrote about it in March, April, another cover story in a magazine, that it's come from a lab in China. I say it openly, I say it again and again. And there is a lady's interview I just read the other day in the Week magazine, in which she turned around and she was one of the scientists working on it. Here it is. And here is what she says, that the virus came from a Chinese lab, and it falls logically into place. So it was meant to cripple the world economy. The general referred to the world economy and China. Remember, the last time they attacked India, when the world was facing the Cuban Missile Crisis. This time, if they attack us, they think the world is not going to pay attention, because they found the entire Western world's leadership too preoccupied with dealing the crisis at home. China has created the problem, bounced back, it's ready to play the games by its own rules. And a lot of developing and third world countries, I'm sorry to use the word third world, but it's basically to convey what it was meant to convey. That a lot of underdeveloped or developing countries look up to the steady model that China provides for leadership, as against liberal democracy, which has riots on the streets. Back to you.
Thanks, Maruf. That's very, very insightful. I'm going to recommend if we can just extend the conversation, because it's so important and so valuable. We are scheduled for an hour, but I think if I would indulge my guests, I know hopefully some of you can extend it, because I do want to come to Swami to respond, but I want to go to Mr. Rai, who's made some excellent points about the manufacturing, about collaboration in manufacturing. A lot of our viewers, Mr. Rai, who are in the defense sector, want to understand specifically from you, where do you see the opportunities, and is it going to be less bureaucratic now with the current administration? What choices and how should they go about doing this? And what are your viewpoints on this, Mr. Rai?
Yeah, I'll just say like that. See, to have this meaningful outcome
Mhm.
of the US-India relationship, which at the time supposed to be at the peak at the best, this can only transmit down below if the MSMEs of India and US they start interacting. They have to go beyond the intergovernmental deals, right? Because the real Make in India drive can be achieved through the MSMEs in India, and which at the present they are basically thriving and waiting for the opportunity. Therefore, US should be ready to transfer the technology, to have a partnership development with this MSME, right? Project specific cases, whose DAP is very, very clear. Nowadays, they have gone to the Make 3 drive. So one sort of alignment is required, you know, considering the overall objective of the India-US relationship and Make in India drive in the India, wherein we are also targeting from Make in India to Make in World, basically, Make for the World, which can benefit US too. India, you can get the cheaper labor, you can get the manpower, and you are having the MSME, matured MSMEs in place. So there has to be some paradigm shift, in the thought process, and therefore all the procedural delay. You should have a specific US-India specific strategy. We should carve out of this DAP 2020 or and US regulations. If unless this is handled, it will be basically again, it will be a time-taking processes which cannot give the meaningful results. And MSMEs in India, they will start also losing the interest. These people, they are ready basically. They want work orders. They want something to move ahead. They cannot invest money unless until there is a clarity, there is a clear-cut order into their lap. So this is the right time with the paradigm shift in the thought process and how to align basically in these two industries, which can give the fruitful results. Wherein US can tackle, from their supply chain to the manufacturing hub in India, targeting Middle East, Southeast Asia, and South Asia, including India. So that should be the strategy basically. When Indian industry will be willingness ready, I mean they're ready. That's my view.
That's excellent, Mr. I'm going to, we have been joined by Manish Chauhan, who's also uh, in the defense sector. Manish, can you respond to what Mr. Rai is talking about with how Indian industry and the US industry can collaborate specifically in terms of some of the opportunities, especially with Atmanirbhar, Make in India, and all those programs that they have? Manish, you're on mute.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Sorry about that. So excellent discussion. A lot of topics has been discussed. Most have been focused on the product side. What happens is that uh, because the services industry is not as what do you call sexy as the products industry, so service industry tend to get ignored. I agree with all the panelists, especially with Maruf and Sunil, that India can be one of the hub for a defense hub for the entire Southeast, not just for Southeast but also Far East Asia. And where India and US can come together is learn from US as to how US defense or US federal government depends on the contracting industry. In India, the contract we in India needs to promote the defense contracting industry in order to make the entire defense industry very successful. Unfortunately, that was not the case. Of course, there has been changes where Air Force has recently, I think in December, Allah has welcomed the MROs, private sector MRO companies, to get into the defense industry. So strengthening the defense industry, defense service industry within the country will definitely help. And coming back to your question, Sanjay, uh, India can learn a lot from US defense industries, particularly the service industry. If India opens up its doors to the service companies in the US, and those companies can come into US and India. They can strengthen the ecosystem, the defense ecosystem in India, and that will give rise to a lot of local companies that will get into defense services. There's also needs to be a political will to open up. The Air Force has just opened up, but Navy and Army to open up uh, their their industry to services. Once the service industry in India is strengthened, then it will be easier for India to become a hub in terms of not just in services but also in product uh, for Southeast Asia and Far East Asia.
Great. Thanks so much, Manish. General Sivaj, you had very eloquently talked about the collaborations that we can do. You have some leaders on the US side, um, in the industry side, and some of them on the policy side. What would be your message? You and Maruf have talked very eloquently about China. You have had first-hand experience, but when you talk to Swami or Manish or Sunil, these are leaders in the defense industry in the US. Um, Opportunities for them and messages for them, General Sivaj, with your vast experience, sir.
Absolutely correct. Sanjay, two, three things. First of all, India has already increased the FDI in defense from 49% to 74%, with the aim that the investment must come to our defense sector, and the private players within the country will also play an active role. This was one of the mistake India has committed over a period of time, that our public sector was only looking after the defense item, and you did not find a competition coming. And now once we opened up, that one is that FDI has increased from 49 to 74, and second, we are having a collaboration with the private company. Now for M777, the one Mahindra Defense will be making basically this in India. Same way we have K9 Vajra we have taken from South Korea. That one will be made by the L&T. So the private companies have also come up and start collaborating and start manufacturing, and we can in a position then able to export. My point is, as far as America is concerned, it has to become slightly more realistic. Two, three things where I can point out. We are now requiring another 5 to 6 more squadron of Air Force. These are medium multi-combat aircraft, and India is looking for it. And now we have taken our two squadron of Rafale. That is not good enough. We need 42 squadron if we have to fight on the two fronts of China and Pakistan. But our squadrons have come down to almost 32. So there is a requirement of another 8 to 10 squadron over a period of time. But we need a modern and state of art. What we were looking for F-22 and F-35 if the America US can offer us. But what they were offering was F-21, because F-21 is just a modern version of F-16. What they wanted is their aerospace industry to work, but they are not realizing it that F-21 is a weapon or an aircraft of past. We don't need an aircraft for 5 years. We are looking for another 30, 40 years. And therefore, our request to the US is go for the best and give us what you are giving to NATO. Give us what you have given to Israel. You have given to Turkey F-35. You have given to Japan. So this is one issue. Second thing is, when we have gone and done a deal with Russia for S-400 air defense system, which is state of art, they should have realized our compulsion, not try to put CARSA, Countering America Adversary through Sanction Act. They are trying to put Sanction Act. China has already taken that. So therefore, they should be realistic to our, certain defense requirement, not only from America but to other. Second thing is, what sort of pressure they have put it on India-Iran relationship. Chabar is a very important project which India has taken, so that, it not only benefit India that we have to go to Afghanistan and Central Asian state. It also is useful for America because it can be utilized to bypass Pakistan to go to Afghanistan and to Central Asian state, and also connect North-South corridor. But the tremendous pressure that America put on us that we should stop importing oil from Iran, and also on the Chabar port. And the result is now slowly and surely the Chabar port is going toward, the Iranis are now taking a lot of facilities from China. The Jaidan to Chabar railway track is now being taken by the Chinese. And if it happens like this, Chabar and Gwadar, they can connect it. So this, America must realize the ground reality that they have to give us some sort of concession, especially whatever relation they have with Iran. They must see a realistic picture, possibly. This is what may change after Joe Biden comes. In case Joe Biden comes, that possibly that he will be more realistic with Iran. The nuclear deal which was there, which was thrown out of the box by Clinton, possibly. So therefore, this is one thing which is very important. The other 2-3 issues is where US can help out in case tension mounting between India and China, is that their 3 aircraft carrier which are there already, USS Nimten, USS Ronald Reagan and USS Roosevelt, and they are not aircraft carrier, they are aircraft carrier group. So the threat in being, if they are operating in South China Sea or India possibly, and a Malabar exercise which will be now having it with US, with Japan, with Australia and Indian Navy, will put a tremendous pressure. So therefore, this is also indirectly putting a pressure on Chinese. There is a requirement of putting pressure on Chinese now, because Chinese are on the back foot. I agree with that. But Chinese have to be put more pressure, because they must understand that if they want an honorable exit, they must go back to a pre-April 2020 status quo. We are not going to accept anything else. What China is trying to put pressure that we first vacate what we have taken in south of Pangangso, which are strategically important. Remember, if you can, then in 1965, we have taken Hajipir, and that was strategically so important, but we lost it in Tashkent once we are diplomatically had to sign under the pressure of the Russian. So therefore, no pressure can now change us as far as giving back what we have taken, which is our in south of Pangangso. And therefore, the Chinese must understand, if they want to have an honorable relationship or exit from there, they must go back to where they were before April 2020. And American can play an indirect role by putting pressure, by a threat in being, by the 3 aircraft carrier. They can give us intelligence, they can give us spare part, they can assure us that whenever whatever military equipment we need it, they will able to give it. That is very important. We don't need anything else because we are in a position to fight two-front war as far as we can face China and Pakistan collectively. So this is the important thing. So my point is, as far as India and US relations are there, they are on the upswing. They will keep on going up because type of agreement which we have done is, we have done COMCASA, communication, compatibility and security agreement. We have also done a security treaty agreement one. We have also done a logistic and maintenance agreement. So our relationship are on the right. They must continue going. We are basically having a strategic defense partnership. In 2016, which we have done it, it means that they will able to give us the best weapon system, but they must be realistic. And another important issue which is there is, when we were buying more than 70% of military equipment from Russia, because we didn't get the best of it from the US. And the second thing is that technology transfer and made in India concept. So somewhere America has to make some concession when we are now going for taking American military hardware. Their industry is on the road. They are getting a lot of employment in America, and they are also getting a foreign exchange. They must do two things. One is that over a period of time, technical they have to transfer to India, and the second thing is they must able to give us the best one which is available, because we are a strategic defense partner, and we are the one which are looking their interest in Indo-Pacific, and we need America, America need India. Whosoever come next president, things are not going to change much, because our relationship are on the upswing and they are inseparable. They are the two sides of the same coin, and to me it looks like that the Indian-American relations are looking on an excellent track, and they must carry on irrespective who becomes the president of USA in January 2021.
Great, thanks. Maruf, you had some points. I did want to get Swami also, because there have been questions about F-35 aircraft carrier stuff Maruf knows in his sleep. So I wanted the US to respond. But Maruf, you had some
Yeah,
question?
yeah. Just briefly, I just want to substantiate the points the general made. I mean, Swami is obviously much better placed to talk about the technical aspects of the aviation sector. But let me tell you a few things. One is that you see, the Indian military system is not totally dictated by the evolving nature of foreign policy. There are many pressures and many checks and balances in place: price sensitivity, transfer of technology, the long-term maintenance, reliability from a partner. So if you buy something, I mean, what was it? One of the reasons that tilted the balance in favor of Rafale, it was because it was assured that at any point 65 to 70% of the aircraft would be operational. That was a guarantee that was given. There was a 30-year technology backup system that was put in place. And currently, whatever America might turn around and say, the Rafale is as good as any other aircraft which is flying around. I'm not talking about what's on the drawing board, I'm talking about what's on the battlefield. The other aspect to understand is, our foreign policy goals are not necessarily the same as America's foreign policy goals. For instance, let me be a bit blunt. America is so driven with vengeance against Iran because of what happened in 1979 that America can't think objectively about how to deal with the country, more so because all its other friends in the Middle East have been ensuring that America is humored sufficiently and Trump gets all the contracts he goes looking for, because Iran is kept in the margins, because there is an existential threat that some countries in the Middle East now feel vis-a-vis Iran. But as the general brought out, we were assured by the OPEC that they would meet the drop in demand which would come into place after Iran's oil was not to be received by us. It's another matter that the COVID has saved that pressure on OPEC because there's not that much movement. So there's a lot of oil which is waiting to come in, but we don't know how to use it or how to store it, and vice versa. But on ordinary circumstances, Iranian oil is 17% of our requirements. It is much sweeter and therefore easier to refine. Thirdly, we invested in the Chabar port on a nod from Washington. So if we were to put in 300 million upwards out there, we would like to take the benefit of it and not get China to come in with their deep pockets and ruin. It is not about servicing Afghanistan per se. Please look at the issues beyond Washington's prisms. Washington, in many assessments in India, does not figure to be the answer to all the world's problems. In fact, many see it as the problem creator per se. I'm sorry, I'm being very straight about it, but it needs to be understood there. So, if you want to engage with India as a favorable relationship, which is all weather, then you need to look at some of our concerns. We are not just looking at servicing West Afghanistan through the Chabar port and the rail line from there. We're looking at the north-south corridor, which goes right up to Eurasia and even possibly Russia. And that corridor would not just give India, but the Central Asian countries an exit from their landlocked environment and wean them away from dependence on China. Please understand that aspect. And there is also the issue of about Russian equipment that India takes. We all know when the crisis hit us on our face, and I think it was basically, as I've argued, it was an absence of assessment of looking at China any other way except of making the bilateral trade numbers go up, which was also to our disadvantage anyway. But when it hit, where did Rajnath Singh go? He went to Moscow. He asked Moscow for MiG-29s. He asked Moscow for more Sukhois. And it's not that HAL in India was not making Sukhois. And Moscow said, sure, you get everything and you will also get your S-400s much in double quick time. Now, we have to ask ourselves this question, where did all of America's lobbying go when the Indian defense minister or one of the people he could have deputed should have been also there in Washington saying that we are buying this from the Russians. Would you like to sell us something here? Because here is an opportunity to enter the market. Now you get stuck on a price band in your mind, which has definitely a strong profit margin built into it, then you're going to lose out on business. And let me tell you, I mean, all the people who promote the F-16, I said something many years ago and I logically stand by that. India never buy the F-16 or a variant of that, however advanced it is. It may have the best fighter pilot seat. It may have the longest radius time for pilots to fly the distance because it's more comfortable. Why will you not buy it? Because Pakistan has a 30-year head advantage over you on basic understanding of the technologies. Do you know even before the RFP for the Rafale equivalent fighter was made out, the Air Force was already willing to buy another variant of the Mirage because the Air Force was so comfortable with it. A defense secretary told me that. He told the Air Force, he said, excuse me, there is a process in place. Let us go through the acquisition process, which is RFI, RFP, NC. Everybody who's familiar with it knows the terminology is what it means. So basic issue is that the comfort level with technology is very important. And I would urge people in the aerospace industry in America to do a serious study, get away from America and come and spend time in India quietly and understand what would sell in India. Let me give you an example, right? In India, people are looking for certain elements in a weapons platform, which is not what people are trying to sell from the US to India in. For example, that what is the kind of transfer of technology that will take place, which will make me go up the next steps of the ladder. Right now, on a ladder of 1 to 10, I mean, I'm sorry to say, but people, my Mr. Earlier, Mr. Sunil, who was here, he may disagree with me, but Indian DPSUs are probably at 3, maximum 4 on that band. The American industries are on 8 or 9. So how do they jump from 3 to 9 to come on par with that, to be able to even absorb your technology? The F-16 walas told me over a lunch that it'll take Indian aerospace industry at least 18, if not 24 months, even if the L-70 platform was put out in India. Because to understand that, you need to spend that much time with that level of technology. We're not there. So maybe easier to use technology could be made in India. High end stuff could be made in US because they are the knowledge leaders in the world. But we need to get a realistic picture of what you can sell in India, which a service can buy without appearing for it to be thrust down their throats. Now, all the stuff that has come on FMS deals, I'm aware, these are come because their equivalent doesn't exist in the world, and they have been tried and tested in battle. And this is a certificate that White House gives, and then the Indian government goes in for those deals. Fine, good. And we're all happy with all those C-17s and C-130s and the helicopters and everything. No doubt they are force multipliers. But the last point is General Saab's point. Where are you going to get your next 10 squadrons from? The big ticket items I'm talking of. The so-called mother of deals, which has been eluding Washington for at least 15, if not 20 years. Where will you get that? I would take a strong guess that the Indian Air Force will make a choice between a high-end force multiplier, which is like हाथी के दांत, दिखाने के लिए, खाने के लिए नहीं, but more hardy, well-priced, smaller items, whether it's the Tejas, whether it is the Saab Gripen, whether you can provide something which is small, easier to buy on the budget, and you buy it because I don't think we have the money only to indulge the Air Force. The other services have to also get stuff. And the wish list of the services is so big that for 1 year, every Indian has to go on a fast and not eat anything if all the wish list is to be met. So we have to get realistic about what can be bought by India. And just because you buy or don't buy, I think the US needs to do a serious self-examination. Are we on their side as a political, geopolitical partner because we share the same principles of free societies, democracy, freedom of speech, freedom of activity? Or at the end of the day, you may trumpet oldest democracy and the largest democracy angle, but the US also has a track record of having dealt with countries which have a dubious political record. So what is it that you want? Is you just want business from us, that we pay for our security like the Middle East pays for its security? Because they buy American systems, so America guarantees them, but the Saudis have F-16s or F-18 aircrafts or whatever, which the pilots take it into Yemen and hit civilian targets, not because they wanted to, but because they can't shoot straight. Or do you want to deal with India, where our pilots, I know it for a fact, I've spent time with Sukhoi pilots, I've spent time on the aircraft carrier, and they've shown me certification, they've shown me proof that our guys in India, and we're all of Indian origin, wherever we may be, we're still Indian. Our guys in India are as good as any in the world. So that is the partnership you're looking for, or it is just that you'll get a $500 billion deal and you just give us the entire umbrella of cover. We can't afford it. We have to do, Guns and Roses choice. And so it's a very difficult challenge, not just for Modi, but for every prime minister. that what is it we buy, what can we make at home, and American industry, if it makes it in India, is it still going to meet anywhere near the profit margins? So, these are very big questions. We need a straight talking debate about and answers to that. And believe me, just because we don't buy stuff, just because Rajnath Singh went to Moscow, it doesn't mean we are not on your side. We're still on America's side. And we made it known again and again. And Russia, there is a problem between Washington and Moscow. That problem will persist. It's more about who is challenging whom in the geopolitical space. But for us, the issue is where can we get quick supplies to what we want when we want it. These are tough questions. They can't be answered here. But I'm sure in subsequent debates that we have, we can people can raise these questions. These questions can be answered, and it's not about India is your friend because India is giving you a market to sell your stuff here. India is still your friend because India believes in the same principles as you. India may not buy your stuff. Pakistan hogged up all your stuff and cheated you at every stage. $33 billion poured into Pakistan. And today, short of abusing each other in public, you're doing everything else. So who is more reliable? You didn't pour anything into us. We bought it. We didn't get any loans. $18 billion, we paid for it. And it's taxpayers' money. And taxpayers are asking questions in India because we have an open democracy like what is in the US. So sorry about this, but I do get a bit emotional. But I think we need to understand that India means well and India can be relied upon. And India is not going to look for handouts. We're too proud to do that. We're all of the same gene pool. So I think we can appreciate the sentiment.
Thanks, Maruf. Swami, it's going to fall on you and Manish to defend the US positions. They want F-35s, they want reliability, they want it price conscious, they want these multiple squadrons. And by the way, just so that you know, Swami served in the US Air Force. He knows Air Force.
I think I met Swami. I think I've interviewed him for one of our shows. I remember meeting him in Delhi. He's been a fighter pilot. I know that.
Yes, so...
Yeah, I was on your show in Times Now. Or
so you're the man, and Manish is the man to defend the US.
Absolutely fine. I'm third generation Air Force. My grandfathers, my uncles were Indian Air Force. I'm U.S. Air Force, so there's a picture behind me in the back of my grandfather built the first Hurricane in India fighter plane. It sits in the Pala Museum today. You can go touch the same fighter. I'll say this. Let's start with the foreign policy, then I'll talk to some certain comments. Both the United States and India view the world in foreign policy in a multipolar fashion. The difference is what we see as negative poles and what India has seen as the negative poles don't align. Some poles India can work with well, like Russia and Iran and things like that. The United States simply can't, but they still recognize the same centers of gravity in foreign policy, and they react to them differently. And though we're naturally aligned, democratic families, which is why Indians do so successfully well in the United States because of the same mindset, the same belief system. The United States doesn't react the same way to some of the same situations. So when it comes to the defense industry and getting the great technology, and I know General Suwach was making some comments about greater technology to transfer to India, there's a fundamental disconnect between the high-level technology and the price it records to buy such a thing of that capability that simply cannot be made cheaper. It is the cost that it is. And India has always struggled with those costs. But that really hasn't been the barrier. If India wants to find the money to buy something, it finds the money. I don't think it's ever been much of a problem. But certainly at the scale we're talking about, it could be. Where the problem typically lies is that level of technology requires a certain level of security apparatus behind it. And India has chosen that security apparatus and its administration to qualify under U.S. certification was to be handled by the DPSUs and by DRDO. And they have, to my knowledge, never gotten to that point where they've agreed that the technology, if provided, could be protected to a level the United States was comfortable with. That doesn't really is not the primary excuse for it not happening. I think price and polar alignments in foreign policy are the primary reasons these sales don't happen. But there is still a fundamental problem there of if the technology was given, how could its secrets, its capabilities be protected? It requires a certain level of very intrusive American end-use monitoring that we do with the allies that India has never been comfortable with. It required a certain level of agreements to be signed that we've never been able to get India to sign on. They're just starting now to sign those things like LSA and you know and the Jusomia and some of the communications encryption policies and treaties that need to be signed in order to provide that level of security that once America sells its best, it won't immediately go to somebody that we don't want to see it, that wouldn't be infiltrated, taken, stolen in some way, and then the tactical advantage for both India and the United States is simultaneously lost. And now you've got a very expensive piece of equipment that doesn't have the advantages that you want. Additionally, there are very good capable systems. I won't say the Rafale is not a capable system. It's a very capable aircraft. There are very many capable aircraft. F-18s and F-16s or F-21s, F-22s. They're all very capable. I will say just the one comment about pilots that Maruf made because it struck me as funny. Yes, Indian pilots are great pilots. I know that very well. But there are bad pilots in every Air Force, and if I give you a better jet, you'll just kill people the wrong way faster. That's all that's going to do for you. So at a certain level, you do need to have great equipment and great pilots. Indian pilot training is certainly fantastic. I know many of them as personal friends. I know that they're great at that. But the equipment alone doesn't make you a more effective fighting force necessarily without that training. And what I talked about earlier was the United States doesn't sell the system just to sell the system transactionally, though it appears that way. There is actually an entire 30 to 40 or 50-year relationship that revolves around those systems and how we train, how we fight together, how we plan together, how we choose to engage together. And that's really what the foreign military sales process is supposed to be about, creating those long-lasting tactical military relationships around those systems. And if you fly any of them, if you serve in any of them, you know that bond between you and those you work with around it is very strong. So it's more than just a transactional sale. We just want to sell widgets or whatever the United States. They are actually selling and trying to put together a longer-term relationship. What has been difficult is that disconnect in the multipolar views on foreign policy between the two countries and where the use of the systems will go gets in the way, which is why, like you rightly pointed out, Maruf, when there's one-of-a-kind systems that only the United States has, and they're relatively innocuous from a foreign policy perspective, like C-130s and C-17s, the sales go through very quickly. Defensive systems like an M777 similarly is an easier sale. There have been some offensive weapon sales that have been very interesting. That we've seen, for example, like the CV-107 that was done, where you begin to see a bit more of an offensive approach to collaboration between the two services, between Air Force, Indian Air Force, U.S. Air Force, and such. But the longer-term relationship will only benefit from that greater technology uplift on a couple of things. One, the United States has to get to a price point of that technology where India can afford it, and that's going to take time. It's not that by the time the 6th-gen fighters come out, the F-35s, the huge price of technology may reach a point where India can perhaps be a part of it. Second, the security apparatus in India has to provide more than just basic certification. It has to pass a level of absolute surety and confidence on the U.S. defense apparatus that all the technology, the stealth, the electronic warfare, all those things, we're going to reach a level of security that won't be lost in Indian hands. If India has protected it correctly. I'll be honest, I don't think the way India has mechanized that process has been very good. In order, giving it to DPSU, I don't think really helps. I think it needs to be more of a whole of an MOD perspective, a senior level joint secretary at the top watching over this, not bureaucrats inside DPSU saying that I'll protect America's technology, especially if it's the technology group, the DRDO, or somebody who would benefit from diving into it, right? So third, I think India will never find fair weather friends or all weather friends in every political situation. It's just too unpredictable to understand where India might make a decision. India needs the freedom to make its political decisions exactly how it feels it needs to make them. And so what I recommended always was a certain amount of spares purchase, no matter who you buy from. I don't care if you buy from the Russians or the Israelis or the Indians, the French, or the U.S. you should have enough spares stockpile available that in the days of sanctions or in the days of losing your all-weather friends, which will occur from time to time, India has a war-fighting capability to do it. Now that also puts another downward pressure on pricing because you can't stockpile enough spares for a protracted war, and the stockpile that will allow for that. But if you don't have it, I promise you, with a higher level of technologies that people will provide, there are political disagreements that could shut things off, even with the Russians or with the French or with the Israelis or with the Americans. India could end up making decisions where those stockpiles are all India would have. So it's kind of important to have that ability to create those spares, have those spares, or an industry ecosystem that can reproduce that material when necessary to maintain a warfighting capability, which right now India's ecosystem doesn't quite have. It is based on the tech transfer not being there. I think the FDI move is a very good move. It will allow a lot of companies to come in and start to truly invest. I'll say the FDI policy probably doesn't do enough to protect Indian interests right now. There isn't an infrastructure in that FDI policy that I've seen. Perhaps I haven't seen it yet, where Indian nationals are protecting the interest of the Indian company despite the ownership being 74% or more foreign, with the proper board governance or corporate governance that goes around that. The United States has a similar process where you can be 100% owned by a foreign entity in the United States, but the board of directors is managed by all Americans. That's how that's done, and still the investment comes in. So a lot of it is the structure on how you mechanize. How do I get great technology? How do I protect it? How do I manage Indian national interests while allowing majority foreign defense or foreign direct investments into it? And then where you don't align in a multipolar foreign policy environment with the United States, my humble recommendation is just stick to the polls where you agree. You're just going to have to disagree on those polls in areas where you don't, and see what movement you can make in that environment. Because I don't really think the Indian mindset and foreign policy is ever really going to resonate with the United States fully. In all different allies in the near future. I think it will be 20, 30 years before that ever really happens. So.
Can I just quickly respond with 2 points?
Sure.
Points. One is, Swami, thanks. I think you are outstanding, what you've said. And I mean, it's education for me to listen to you. But what I would say is 2 points. I think you people at your end in US and people like us here in India have to now create a narrative where we need people to understand that you don't need to do strategic partnerships and business deals with countries where you are both completely on the same page in foreign policy. A business engagement should be a business engagement, period. And that's where there is another problem that America says LEMOA, SESMOA, and various other foundation agreements must go through. But we have a problem. America's equipment and various sharing of information is also done with friends you have, which we don't like, Pakistan, a case in point. So unless you abandon that lot, we can't be sharing all the information and hope like hell, fingers crossed, that our friends across the border don't hear them. The third point is that whenever there is this requirement of selling products within India, you see the big disconnect in India that we have the most bizarre civil military relations that exist anywhere in the world. So you have a know-all bureaucracy because they're one exam wonders who then rise, and you have a health secretary who then becomes, I mean, secretary in India is not the one who runs Pentagon or White House or Foggy Bottom. Secretary in India is a bureaucrat. It's not a minister. And you have a health secretary in India who may have been keeping track of injections and syringes and suddenly becomes defense secretary where he has to keep track of missiles. They look the same, but they do different things, right? So you can't have a generalist bureaucrat. And they, in Pakistan had a coup in 1958. And since then, the military became the most powerful institution in Pakistan. We had a coup around the same time or even earlier by the bureaucracy. and they are the most powerful institution in India. They make the rules, they're unfireable, you can't remove them, and they're most comfortable dealing with their hangers on. And the DPSU are their hangers on. The military doesn't have a career path in defense procurement. So you could be an outstanding brigade commander in the Kashmir Valley, and then you're given a Delhi posting, and as an afterthought, given defense procurement. By the time you get the hang of it, you go on to command a division in Arunachal Pradesh on the McMahon line. So it is just incidental in your career graph that you've also done defense procurement. You got to be there from day one till you become a general. You're just in that, and that is. And but the bureaucracy is not going to trust the military to get too close to another turf that they control. The DPSUs are controlled by them. The ordnance factories are controlled by them. And if there is one living example where administrative skills and governance has not been applied, you don't need more examples. Look where Israel has got, look where we are.
So let me make a point to that, because it's very important that this might illuminate why you see resistance to get the highest technology out of the United States. While the bureaucrat might control the bureaucracy and the ordnance factories and the DPSUs, the technology handed to an ally or a partner, high technology, is touched by military and those factories. It's touched by everybody. And so the access to that technology goes beyond the bureaucrats' hands and beyond the hangers-on of the DPSU's hands. It goes into the hands of the military as well. And the United States looks at a whole of a country's security apparatus to protect that technology. So it doesn't, to a certain extent, who administers the process is one thing, but who actually touches the material and do they subscribe to those procedures and there's certification of that behavior, that technology can be protected. That's a very big barrier toward getting the highest technology in the United States. If you can do that, then it's okay. But you have to say that even the youngest pilot who sees the technology all the way to the bureaucrat who sets the policy are all protecting it in the same manner. That's the big concern between the Jisomi Industrial Annex and SISMOA and all those other things, that it's agreed to all the way down at the base and the brigade level that technology is truly protected. I believe the systems are more in place in the Indian military because the Indian military protects secrets all the time, right, for all kinds of systems. But that integration of that whole process, that certification, that has always been a barrier. But in terms of the ability to make the sale or get the technology across, even if you don't want to do the transactional or strategic level of engagement with that sale, it really does come down to, after you get past that, I can certify that all the technology is there, it can be protected, but the United States can verify that it's being protected on a regular basis. This has always been a problem for India. And then second, the price is still going to be high. I mean, there isn't really a scenario here where the price is going to get down immediately. Like, they're not going to sell F-35 for $20 million next week. They're going to sell those things for quite a lot of money. So even if all the other positions are in place, India has to find its way into a financial position to pay for this technology. It wasn't developed as cheaply as a big 29 was, right? Some of the ways that our partners, your partners, India's partners had done this was, in Russia, you would buy an engine for a MiG-21. You wanted just a few parts. You had to buy the whole damn engine. It was a cheap engine, but you had to buy all these other extra parts to go with it. The United States would sell the parts, on an individual basis, and those parts in and of themselves have a higher price. But you understand there's a different model for the way that those spares and capability comes to India from its partners. I would argue that no particular partner of any country, India or the United States, gives away stuff at a loss. Right? They all try and make their profit in some way or another. Some gain of one thing, or whether it be political gain or financial gain. Our technology that the United States sells is the top technology. It doesn't come at a lower technology levels price. And so India, when they do the benchmarking, for example, they have to go look at, you can't benchmark an F-35 against a MiG-21 or a MiG-29. You have to benchmark it as it sits with its technology. And that's where we typically run into things. You go, well, I can buy 200 of these for 10 of those. And like, yeah, but that 10 can kill all 200 of those in a single fight. So the math is never done correctly in that bureaucracy that you speak of. There's a certain best value conversation that India has never really gotten to, nor is there a life cycle costing analysis done that India has ever really properly taken into account. Both of which, if I were to buy a more expensive car, but I have no maintenance on it for 20 years, or I buy a cheaper car, but every year I got to go put a new engine in it, the costs eventually outrun themselves. So those analyses are not done correctly with India on how we do this examination of the technology. But that's what goes into the builds of these things, not just how great they are at effectively taking out targets, but that they can do them consistently, regularly. For example, Rafale calls for 60 to 70% availability of aircraft. The United States fights for 90% availability for aircraft. And so the technology that goes into that and the ability to design that is much more expensive. But in the long run, the costs are cheaper, right? So you'll see that. Just take a look at your C-130 and your C-17 availability rates compared to your ILs, and you can see the difference in cost if you look at that from a daily basis.
Thanks.
Indeed.
Yeah, Sanjay,
We start with
Sanjay, can I add something? Yeah, Sanjay, can I add 2-3 points?
yeah. And we'll conclude with Hemant and Manish. We've taken a lot of time. Believe me, I've learned a lot. I could go on. General Sawaj.
See, the point which has been spoken, I fully agree. Certain issues are very correct. But as America has to take a overall view, a realistic view. You see, why India was buying almost 70% and more equipment from Russia? Because the Russians were ready to give us a technology and also give us the best of the weapon system available to them. Now, point is that after all, it also cost money. We have paid to them. Now, if America has now given us C-17, C-130J, Chinook helicopter, and Apache attack helicopter, and so therefore things have changed. Now they need to change further. India track record is whatever technology has been given to us has never been given passed to any other one. Remember that Americans have given F-16 to Pakistan, and you think that the technology will remain safe? It can be easily passed to the China. Today J-20, which has been manufactured by China, is a poor copy of F-35, and they have not able to copy well. So the point is, Indian track record is very good, and Indian industry, military industry, has got a large broad base. They have missed the boat. In case they wanted that Indians should buy more of American equipment, then they have to be more accommodated to Indian requirement. And as I give you an example of F-35, if they start thinking that they are going to earn everything from India, may not be correct. My point is that once India is such a large, big industry, if you go for it, you give us our accommodative rate, and it is possible. After all, you have been selling the equipment also to Middle East. So Indian track record is very good. Indian technology transfer has to be there over a period of time, and a jointmanship is the key word. Remember, the Russians have come to us in aid and help whenever we need it. The BrahMos missile, which is an example, which is now ready for exporting to Vietnam, Indonesia, is a joint venture between India and Russia. And this is state of art because it has a nuclear warhead. The best supersonic missile in the world today is a BrahMos missile. So it has been with the collaboration of Russia and India. So my point is, we are prepared to go toward America and buy almost 20-25% of military hardware and equipment from US. But US must be also realistic that on an accommodative rate, because we have a broad market, should able to give us and also transfer of the technology and the best weapon system which is available, which they are giving to NATO and to their friends. So this is our requirement. I'm sure America is understanding it, and that's why they are giving us the Guardian drone. They have given us, you can say C-17, C-13J, Apache attack helicopter. So all these things have been given, but in future also, if they want to do a business with India and they want that Indians should buy more of a military hardware from America. Remember, no attack helicopter is of American origin with Indians. We will love to have it F-35, F-22 if they come with the accommodative rates. They have to be practical. Indians don't have deep pockets, but Indians are a strategic partner. They are the close friend. Please be accommodative. Manufacture in India. Have a technical collaboration with us. You will not lose in the long run. We are a partner which will look through it. Today, F-16 was shot down by MiG-21 by our wing commander. but you have not able to find out where is that F-16 gone, from where has it come. So my point is, today you should be realistic. You are now doing a business with India, and India is a large market, and India is a strategic trade partner which will be reliable. And if you will able to give us a technology, it is a win-win situation for both India and America. And in the future, I feel both sides have to go slightly closer, because these are the best democracy in the world. One is the largest, one is the oldest. In case they come together, the world stand to gain peace and stability.
Thank you, Janu. Hemant, just a brief concluding remarks from you and Manish, and I'll follow up with Swami to make sure he can get some best prices for F-35s for them. But that's a separate discussion. Hemant, just a brief
I will
conclusion.
quickly summarize basically 2 points. Number one, even at this moment, US has to look beyond the Indian defense industries as far as the investment is concerned. Who have a like industry, who have the like similarity with the defense is oil and gas. Both the industries is having almost 80% import today also, and they have a lot of commonality, especially since US has become the biggest crude oil producer in the world, and especially after making the shale oil techno-economically viable. So therefore, they cannot ignore in India now. This is a time they should come to the India, invest in India. Our industries, they want to come out from planning mode to the execution mode, and they can tackle basically from here, Southeast Asia, Far East, all together, making India as a hub. Here we'll able to align both the country objective together. Indian industries are thriving. They want to come to the execution mode now. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Hemant. Manish, final comments from you.
Yeah, excellent point from both the side, but this exactly shows how there is a distrust between two countries, and it's because of many years of policies. I wholeheartedly agree with Swami, because he represents an OEM. He represents a company which sells the product, and there are many other companies that I have been part. I have discussed with them. I've been part of the, along with the Indian delegation and other foreign delegations. I've been in the meetings with these suppliers, and first and foremost, the security of the technology. Second, the speed of acquisition. I have heard horror stories about how long Rafael took to acquire. This is a fast-moving industry. You cannot wait for 10 years, 15 years to acquire. We talked a couple of times about Guardian. It took 5 years for GA to sell Guardians, and it is still not been signed. Where Lockheed had spent 4 years to trying to sell F-21, they still have of F-22. They still have not been managed able to do it. So the speed of acquisition. Third is the price. If we want the highest technology, the best technology, then we need to pay the price for that. I mean, there are other suppliers which can sell you cheaper product, but then that comes with a higher cost, which Swami very eloquently alluded to it, is that the maintenance cost is very high. The fourth thing is, how do we bridge this gap? Now, U.S. Uh, goods industry, the product industry is in the hands of the private companies, and they are impatient. They're impatient to sell products to India. It is the bureaucracy, because it's a government to government sale, so that has to be done. There are a lot of things that I can discuss, but based on the time that we already have run out, 55 minutes over the time, what I would feel is that the non-governmental organization like the Image Institute or US Impact or many other institutes, they should come together to create a platform where there's a constant dialogue between two countries. India should also stop treating them as the only customer in the world. I understand India's needs is very high need, but India bargains all the time. We talked about Middle East. Now, US supplies on two reasons. One is to sell their products, and secondly, because of geopolitical situations. They are selling Middle East not because they are not worried about the technology, but because they pay a high price. They use US people to maintain them. So the kind of, in a way, US earns a lot of more money besides than selling just the hardware. The third thing is the speed of acquisition in these countries is very high. I have been part of a country when they were negotiating with India. They wanted F-35s. Sorry, not India, with US. They wanted to buy F-35s. US denied their request to buy F-35s. So they bought F-15. Even before the first airplane is delivered, they just signed 2 days back a contract for F-35s. India should also think that they should go in steps. You cannot always ask for the best technology without creating that trust factor. So go by steps. Don't treat that you are the only customers in the world. There are many other buyers. There are. I mean, if you see the delivery period for F-35s or even F-15 is so long because there are a lot of customers there. But we should look at our interests. We should make sure that the US understands how we can come together for the global good. And I think that think tanks like Image Institute or US Impact or many others can build this bridge between these two countries, and hopefully we'll see better days in the future.
Thank you, Manish. Incredible panel. We could go on for 2 more hours. I think what I'm taking back and a lot of action items is no matter who becomes president, the relationship will continue and grow. There is a real opportunity pointed out by Hemant and Sunil for real partnerships among business. There are obviously challenges, two countries with two independent democracies in terms of perceptions, not getting the latest being offered, maybe not the latest products. And also, there is a little bit of a sticker shock. Maruf pointed out some very important, and General Siwaj pointed out some very important strategic issues, especially relating to the Chabar port in Iran and some other things that US needs to look at. But I think the conclusion is this is a tremendous opportunity for both countries. I would see India with Make in India, Atmanirbhar, for creating jobs, being more self-reliant for US from a strategic standpoint, as well as jobs for India. So thank you all to a great panel. General Siwaj, Hemant, Swami, Maruf, and Maruf will be coming, and Maruf's written some excellent books. He didn't talk about them, but maybe in the next show we will be discussing that. And thank you, Manish. So thank you all. Have a wonderful weekend. I know it's late in India. Bye bye.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.